Chapter 81. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 81, Let him try to be a cuckold author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. Jean, what does this mean? Lou Ziffin could not sit still anymore. He was publicly cursed for impotence, and his face was dark. Meng Meng stood up and looked coldly at her and Xiao Hanya. It was very eye-catching to see her and him sitting at the side, as if he was an outsider. He Longjin saw that he was excited. She blinked her almond-shaped eyes and said in puzzlement, but I think they're right. There's no guarantee of a woman's life after marriage. What if you accidentally cheat on her, or if one day you don't like women and want to be gay? What would I do? Lou Ziffin's expression turned even worse when he was scolded. Seeing so many people watching, Lou Ziffin, as a talented man of Jiang City, naturally could not lose in terms of imposing manner. Jean, don't make a scene, Lou Ziffin said in a low voice. The waiter brought the dishes over. Xiao Hanya washed his hands, picked up the dishes for her, and handed them to her. He said, just eat a little first. I'll make some more for you when I get home later, okay, He Longjin answered by accident. She picked up the dishes with her chopsticks and ate them naturally. She felt 4 pairs of eyes on her opposite side, as if they were going to expose her. He Longjin looked up and saw Lou Ziffin and Qin Nan looking at her in disbelief, then at Xiao Hanya. Are you two dating? Qin Nan saw the tacit understanding between the two of them, and it didn't seem like they were just friends. He and He Longjin had known each other for many years, but there were some things that needed to be distinguished. He could tell at a glance that the intimacy between the two of them was not simple. Lou Ziffin was suspicious. He felt that he had been cheated on by her. He was about to speak when he saw the director of the Land Bureau walk in. When he saw Lou Ziffin, he quickly stepped forward and said to him, Young Master Lou, the land that you urged me to buy has finally been approved. Now we are doing green publicity. We hope that young Master Lou can help us become a spokesperson, the director said as he stepped forward. Lou Ziffin saw the situation and heard that the land had been approved. He naturally had to seize the opportunity. After all, he had not been able to contact the bureau chief recently and thought that it was hopeless. He did not expect that he would be given a surprise today. Come, let's take a few photos. I will send the information over later, the bureau chief warmly invited. Secretary Yang came in from outside and handed over a set of environmentally friendly clothes and a hat. He said, Young Master Lou, the environmentally friendly clothes have arrived. Lou Ziffin stared at the set of clothes. It was a brand new green outfit with a green hat and a green hat with a green mask. His face turned ashen. He pursed his lips and glanced at the bureau chief. He asked in a deep voice, Bureau Chief, what do you mean by this? Environmental endorsement, don't you know, young Master Lou? Recently, the whole world is engaged in environmental protection. Our Jiang City naturally cannot fall behind. The Lou family in Jiang City is the most famous. If young Master Lou can appear, it would be perfect, the director said with a smile on his face. Lou Ziffin looked at the set of clothes and hat. If he did not even have a bottom line, how could he stay in Jiang City once he put on this set of clothes? He was afraid that he would become an expression bag for the rest of his life. Since you want an environmental endorsement, you naturally have to find someone with charisma. I'm willing to pay for it. Before Lou Ziffin could finish his words, he saw He Ruoxue come in from outside. He walked in front of him excitedly and called out in a low voice, Brother Ziffin. Her delicate appearance was as if water could be squeezed out. She's not bad, Lou Ziffin said. He reached out and threw the cuckold to He Ruoxue. He said to her, Xiaoxue, you're just in time. Didn't you used to be a model before? Why don't you try being an endorsement? He Longjin drank a mouthful of tea. She looked at this scene with a meaningful expression. It was even more explosive than she had imagined. Clang! Xiao Hanya's deep black eyes swept over her. His fingertips knocked on the table. She reached out and pinched his waist. She said, Xiao Hanya, what exactly do you want to do? Chapter 82. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 82, How are you doing? Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. He Longjin lazily leaned against the wall, her two hands playing with each other's fingertips as she watched the commotion. At the same time, she was paying attention to Xiao Hanya's actions. Today, he suddenly appeared. It didn't seem like he was here to freeload, but more like he was here to cause trouble. Look, his spoon fell to the ground. When the bureau chief turned around, he bumped into Hiruoshue's bag. My bag. Hiruoshue's bag was knocked down, and the item fell out. Lu Zifan was extremely shocked. He strode forward to snatch it, but the bureau chief was one step ahead of him. He reached out to pick it up and handed it to Hiruoshue. Thank you, Bureau Chief Chen, Hiruoshue said in a low voice. She had never noticed He Longjin's existence because she was sitting next to Xiao Hanya and was blocked by his tall figure. Hiruoshue had yet to touch the information, but she saw the bureau chief withdraw his hand and open the information. No. Hiruoshue was extremely shocked. Lu Zifan's heart was also raised. He subconsciously wanted to snatch it. After all, he had spent a lot of effort to obtain the He family's secret. Originally, he had come here with Hiruoshue to meet him and prepare to exchange information, but now it was ruined. Director Chen, this is mine. Hiruoshue stepped forward and snatched it away. She was not afraid of offending the director. Director Chen saw that she was anxious, so he did not say anything. He just turned his head, but he subconsciously looked at Xiao Hanya and then looked away. However, everything fell into He Longjin's eyes, and her smile deepened. It seemed that Xiao Hanya was better at playing games than she was. Look, he had asked the lawyer to write Lu Zifan's will, and now he was playing Hiruoshue. Could it be that their goals were the same? As long as their goals were achieved, wouldn't it be the same no matter who attacked? I know, Director Chen said. The item was snatched by her. Director Chen suddenly let go, and the paper scattered all over the floor. The lawyers suddenly picked it up. H Street Girls Recruitment. Fees are charged on time. Those who are beautiful and live well will receive additional commission. Candidate Hiruoshue. The lawyer read, and his face turned red. He silently handed the item back to Hiruoshue and said, Are you living well? Hiruoshue was stunned. She could not believe that she snatched it over to take a look. This was not the document she had previously received, but the H Street Girls recruitment letter. She flipped through n pages and felt like she had been hit in the head by someone. She was completely dumbfounded. Impossible, this is clearly the He family's. Hiruoshue was in a daze and blurted out. Lu Zifan stepped forward and bumped into her. He shouted coldly, Xiaoshue, you're confused. Although the He family is currently in a financial crisis, you can't do this kind of thing. Hiruoshue was scolded by him before she came back to her senses. She knew that she had almost ruined the matter. Director Chen looked at Lu Zifan meaningfully and then at Hiruoshue. He picked up the green clothes and green hat on the ground and said, Since young Master Lu doesn't like our bureau's environmental protection uniform, then I'll take my leave. As for that piece of land, leave it to someone who has integrity. Director Chen left as he said, not giving Lu Zifan a chance at all. When Lu Zifan came back to his senses, he was already gone. He wanted to chase after him, but he was pulled by Hiruoshue's arm. He cried pitifully and said, Brother Zifan, I really got it, but I don't know why it was changed. She thought about it, but during the process, no one had access to the documents she took, unless when she was bathing, but at that time, except for her, Tang Jilin, and He Wenqing, no one was at the He family. Could it be that Tang Jilin or He Wenqing did something to me? Are they starting to suspect me? Hiruoshue said in a low voice. Xiao Hanya held a handkerchief and elegantly wiped his fingertips. Looking at her meaningful gaze, he raised his handsome eyebrows, took a sip of red wine, and asked, "Your gaze clearly shows that you have taken a fancy to me." Chapter 83. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 83 was so angry that she almost became constipated. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. He Longine lazily moved. She reached out her hand to lift Xiao Hanya's chin and leaned her body in front of him. Her almond-shaped eyes stared at his peerlessly handsome face for a long time and said, "Why do you have a bad face? Have you been a big bad guy since you were young?" Xiao Hanya was held by her chin and asked. He simply did not move and let her admire him. "Do you want to know?" Xiao Hanya asked in a deep voice. Seeing her hair fall down, he tugged at it for her. The two of them were in an ambiguous position. The man's hot breath sprayed on her neck, and his thin lips pressed against her ear. He said in a hoarse voice, "Aren't you also a little bad guy?" "Who said that? I'm a decent and good woman." He Longine's ears itched as he tugged at her. She quickly retorted. Xiao Hanya's intoxicated laughter rang softly in her ears. He said in a low voice, "I like it." That sentence was too deep, as if the wind had brushed past her ear. It was so light that it was barely discernible. It was as if she was hallucinating, or as if he had really said it. "Young Master Lu, don't go. The will hasn't been made yet." The lawyer saw that Lu Zifan had turned around to leave, so he hurriedly chased after him and shouted. He pulled Lu Zifan back, not letting him go. He even came out with a sales pitch and said, "You're still young. It's good to make a will. If you die tomorrow." "Who are you saying will die tomorrow?" Lu Zifan's face was black with anger, as if he was constipated. The lawyer was shocked by his cold voice and subconsciously took half a step away from him. He said in a low voice, "Aren't people going to die sooner or later? Young Master Lu, don't tell me you're an old man who won't die. Get lost." Lu Zifan had enough. These weren't like lawyers, they were simply here to anger him to death. Seeing this, he Ruoshua chased after him and pulled his arm. "Hubby, listen to me. Someone must have played a trick. I clearly got it. Hiruoshua, do you think I'm a fool again and again? My tolerance is limited. If you don't get the thing, we're finished." Lu Zifan said coldly. He didn't want to tangle with her anymore and drove away. Hiruoshua was mad with anger. She had the urge to kill someone. When she turned her head, she saw He Longine in an elegant white sweater lazily leaning against the glass window of the hotel. There was a man flirting with her. She was furious and rushed in. "He Longine, get lost." Hiruoshua had just rushed in and hadn't finished her sentence. The waiter turned around and closed the glass door. Hiruoshua struggled up and a row of nosebleeds flowed out. Xiao Hanya stood up, picked up his coat and put it on. He reached out to help her wrap the scarf around her neck and used his other hand to pick up her coat. He grabbed her hand and said, "This environment is too bad. Let's go." He Longine was forcefully dragged away by him. When he reached the hotel entrance, he shook her coat and put it on her shoulder. "Ah Jean, Jean. D*****, that man is a pervert. He likes me and wants to mess with you. Don't be fooled by him." Qin Nan's entire process. He was completely stunned and did not recover. He was almost blinded by the flash. When he regained his senses and saw that Xiao Hanya had kidnapped He Longine, he wanted to get up and chase after him. When the lawyers saw this, they quickly stepped forward and blocked his way. "Get out of the way." Qin Nan was anxious. His buddy had been kidnapped. What if the other party was a beast? What would He Longine do? "Third young Master Qin, if you want to chase after her, that's fine. Return the car keys." The lawyer obviously did not fall for his trick. Qin Nan listened to the car keys and said irritably, when the F*ck did I take your keys? Thinking of Xiao Hanye's attitude towards Xiao Jin, he inexplicably panicked. Chapter 84. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 83. Looks like a bandit, a hooligan. Author. Purple Peony Machine. Translation, sports car, the other party said succinctly. Qin Nan was instantly doused with cold water and sobered up quite a bit. He looked at the lawyers blocking him. No matter how he looked at them, they didn't look like good people. They looked more like bandits, hooligans. Here you go. Qin Nan took the car keys and threw them to them. They didn't pick them up, and the car keys fell to the ground. Qin Nan's heart ached very much. He ran to pick them up again. Gritting his teeth, he stared at the group of hooligan lawyers and said, "That person surnamed Xiao, is he a hooligan? You, what are you doing?" After Qin Nan finished speaking, he saw them rush up and forcefully drag him out. Qin Nan wanted to resist, but only then did he realize that these people were actually experts. He was a Taekwondo student, but he was actually tightly controlled by them. He did not even have the chance to fight back. At this moment, Qin Nan realized that Xiao Hanye was too terrifying. Even a lawyer was an expert. Third young Master Qin, I see that you are young and you like to flirt with girls. Let's go back and make a will. If one day you lose your virginity and your virginity dies, who will inherit your inheritance? The lawyer said and openly kidnapped him back to the law firm. He Lanjin was held by Xiao Hanye's hand. She struggled a few times and was firmly held by him. When she heard Qin Nan's voice and saw him being taken away by the lawyer, the scene was so comical that she laughed out loud. Are those your lawyers? He Lanjin asked curiously. They looked like lawyers, but she could tell that they were definitely experts. From their movements, she could tell that Qin Nan was a Taekwondo master, but in front of them, he was like a little sheep. Yes, Xiao Hanye replied in a deep voice. When he saw the blush on her face, the smile in his eyes deepened. He saw that she was usually evil to the bone, but in fact, when she was shy, it was even more irresistible. Hey, there are roasted sweet potatoes. I'll go buy one. He Lanjin smelled the fragrance and her brain quivered. She struggled free from his hand. Xiao Hanye looked at her excited look and let go of her hand. He watched her run forward a few times, bent down to sniff, and happily gestured with his small hand, saying, "Boss, give me one." "Okay, be careful, it's hot." The boss listened and packed one for her. When she reached out to take the money, Xiao Hanye had already walked to her side and heard him say, "Keep the change." "Thank you, boss." The stall old man took the red, smiling from ear to ear. He looked at the two of them and said fawningly, "Madam, I've seen countless people and I can tell you that your husband is definitely a good man." He Lanjin listened and wanted to explain, but she realized that refuting a stranger was quite meaningless, so she didn't say anything. However, she didn't say anything, but in Xiao Hanye's eyes, she tacitly agreed. Mr. Xiao, do you want a bite? He Lanjin opened the sweet potato and reached out to pinch a small piece and put it into her mouth. Her fingertips were stained with saliva, so she deliberately reached out to pick a little bit and put it into his mouth. Her almond-shaped eyes were full of cunning, as if she was deliberately teasing him. She didn't expect Xiao Hanye to see this and lower his head to bite her. Seeing this, He Lanjin hurriedly withdrew her hand, but his wrist was held by him. He bent down and lowered his head to take her fingertips, and his spirit tongue slid over her fingertips. He Lanjin's body trembled, and her fingertip felt numb as if it had been electrocuted. When she saw him lower his head and bite the sweet potato on her fingertip, she really ate it. "Xiao Hanye, you hooligan." Her face was as red as a burning cloud, and she did not dare to look at him directly. She threw the entire sweet potato into his arms and kept rubbing her fingertip, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not wipe away the residual warmth that he had left behind. This feeling spread in her heart and spread to every nerve in her body. They were all clamoring inside her body. Chapter 85. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 84 was no better than a man they all liked big boobs offer. Purple Peony Machine Translation. Xiao Hanya looked at the fleeing figure. He followed behind her at a moderate pace. After carefully peeling the skin off the sweet potato, he took half a step forward and walked beside her. He said, "Ah, Jean, come and have a bite." "I don't want it." Jean subconsciously refused. After she finished speaking, she realized that she was also in front of Xiao Hanya. Why did she look like a pretentious little girl? Including the words she said just now, she looked like a couple quarreling and was embarrassed. "Be good, have a bite." Xiao Hanya patiently coaxed her. He took the sweet potato and brought it to her mouth. Seeing that she didn't say anything, he coaxed her in a low voice, "Be good, if you don't eat it, it will get cold." Jean glanced at him, her almond-shaped eyes met his deep black eyes, and her heart beat even faster. After a long while, she moved her eyes away, took the sweet potato from him, and lowered her head to bite it. She was a little absent-minded. "What's wrong? Do you have something on your mind?" Xiao Hanya followed behind her and subconsciously stood to her right, like a wall protecting her in a safe area. Jean walked and nibbled on the sweet potatoes. She laughed softly and said, "This good sister of mine saved my life back then. She has become more and more arrogant over the years. Now, she even wants to replace me. I wonder if I was wrong back then." "You trust the wrong person. That's why you make mistakes one step at a time," Jean said softly. She did not even tell Qin Nan about these things. But for some reason, she subconsciously told Xiao Hanya. The human heart is hard to predict. "Just be yourself," Xiao Hanya said in a low voice. Jean listened. After she finished eating, she suddenly winked at him and said, "She is very charming. Look at Lu Zifan, he is mesmerized by her. Do you want me to connect with Mr. Tai?" Xiao Hanya listened to her teasing. He took out his handkerchief and naturally held her hand. He gently wiped her hand and said, "Okay. Am I serious?" Jean continued. Seeing that he had turned around and walked away, she suddenly turned around after taking 2 steps. She grabbed her hand and led her away. She said in a low but confident voice, "I'm serious too." Jean looked at him. She could not tell that Xiao Hanya actually liked Hiruoshua. She had always thought that Xiao Hanya's behavior was extraordinary, elegant and domineering. His taste was definitely not ordinary. Now it seemed that he was also a common person, but he was a man they all liked, big breasts and flirtatious. Thinking of this, she could not help but feel a little disappointed. Unknowingly, she was led into a shop by him and did not notice it at all. "Sir, may I ask which model you want to buy?" At this moment, the salesperson's voice sounded. However, the store manager pushed her away and scolded her. Then, he walked forward with a smile on his face. 2 girls dressed like etiquette girls carried a tray forward and respectfully said, "Mr. Qiao, please take a look." "Okay." Xiao Hanya reached out to take the box, opened it, and then held Jean's hand and put it on. The cold thing was placed on her fingertips. Jean was just looking down on Xiao Hanya's vulgarity, and she even imagined how Hiruoshua had crushed him on the bed, when she noticed something strange on her fingertips. She saw that there was a diamond ring on her fingertips. "Congratulations, Mrs. Qiao. This diamond ring of yours is made of a special material. Wearing it won't hurt your fingers. I wish you all a happy old age and a fruitful child." The store manager brought all the employees and bowed respectfully, reciting the lines they had prepared beforehand. Jean was stunned. She looked at this group of people as if she was looking at an idiot, then at Xiao Hanya, reaching out to take off the diamond ring. Xiao Hanya held her hand and stopped her. He said in a low voice, I only love you. Put it on. Scenery garden is yours, I'm yours, and the sports car is yours. He Longin listened and suddenly sneered. She asked, then is Han Beiqing mine too? Chapter 86 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 85 I wonder if his life is good or not. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation Han Beiqing had just returned from outside. He raised his feet and walked in. He saw Qiao Hanye's cold black eyes. He felt a chill behind his back. He felt as if a murderous intent was about to suffocate him to death. He subconsciously wanted to step back. You were fired, Qiao Hanye said in a deep voice. Han Beiqing was confused. He was stunned and asked foolishly, Master, I didn't drive the car away. Everyone was silent, and the atmosphere became even stranger. Han Beiqing felt that he had made a mistake, but he did not expect it. He walked to the side quietly and lowered his head to ask He Longin, what happened to my master? No matter how he looked at it, he felt that his master had a slight endocrine disorder and was in a very bad mood. Before He Longin could say anything, Han Beiqing was grabbed by Qiao Hanye and dragged out. He threw him out, closed the glass door behind him, turned around, and walked towards her, saying, Ah Jean, since you're wearing my diamond ring, from now on, I'm yours. You can keep me, or you can keep me, either way, Qiao Hanye said in a low voice. He Longin held back her laughter and broke her technique in a second. She rubbed her small hands in disbelief and said, okay. From now on, you're mine. She looked at him slyly. He was so handsome, if he fell into her hands. The others looked at this scene in shock and felt cold sweat. Someone actually dared to say that they were keeping young Master Qiao. Wasn't this gambling with their lives? But why did young Master Qiao still look at her dotingly and say, okay. Bang! The store manager could not take the blow and fainted from fright. When he fell to the ground, his body kept twitching non-stop, and he was foaming at the mouth and rolling his eyes. Fine, from now on, you're mine. Work hard. He Longin was a little happy. Nowadays, cowherd men made quite a lot of money. Qiao Hanye did not say anything. Seeing her rub her hands with ill intentions, he stretched out his hand to block it and said, You're all wearing it, so you can't take it off. Are you kidding me? Why would I take something good? He Longin withdrew her hand, thinking about how to make him earn a lot of money. Thinking of this, she waved at him and said, I'm leaving first. Han Beiqing was thrown out. He stood there alone and thought about what was wrong today, but he couldn't remember anything. Could it be that Qiao Hanye was provoked? Master, she. Han Beiqing watched He Longin leave. When he saw the thing in her hand, he rubbed his eyes and wanted to see clearly again, but he found that she had already driven away. Qiao Hanye looked at Han Beiqing's trembling face and glanced at him with his cold black eyes. Han Beiqing quickly became serious and said respectfully, Master, you have a meeting in half an hour. It's just that the people from the Lu group have been asking to see you, but they were rejected by our people, Han Beiqing quickly said. Okay, Qiao Hanye replied and walked towards the driver's seat. Han Beiqing got into the driver's seat and watched Qiao Hanye flipping through the information. He did not mention anything about what had happened just now, so Han Beiqing did not dare to say anything. At this moment, He Longin left the diamond ring shop and drove away to buy some fruits. She was ready to return to the studio. Seeing that the group of ruffians were collecting rent randomly and even injured a person, He Longin quickly stepped forward to stop them. The person took a knife and slashed at her, saying, B*tch, did I tell you to mind your own business? Before the knife could land, she raised her leg and kicked it away, sending the person flying. When the others saw this, they all rushed over. He Longin did not notice that there was a person. She kept staring at her hand, and her face turned pale. She threw the fruit she had just bought on the road and rushed over to block in front of her, taking a stick for her. Chapter 87. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 86. My breasts are not good enough. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation, Chief. At this moment, a group of small police officers saw the situation and also rushed over. Those few hooligans were knocked down by He Longjin and fell to the ground. Their faces were bruised and they cried out in pain. The person in the lead was stepped on his chest by Shi and said coldly, "Now in Jiang City, how can there still be people who dare to collect rent recklessly? It's not right to bully the common people, is it?" A few of the hooligans' ribs were broken by Shi stepped on and blood oozed out from the corner of their mouths. However, the chief was hit by a stick and was shocked by her words. He quickly went forward and said, "Don't worry, we are taking care of it. In less than 3 days, these phenomena will be rectified. Are you okay? Do you want to go to the hospital to take a look?" He Longjin asked when she saw that his body was trembling and his legs were shaking as if he was very afraid. The director's face was full of smiles. He straightened his back and said to her, "What's the big deal about a man getting hit by a stick? Don't worry about it. I will go and deal with this matter now." Seeing this scene, He Longjin received a call from N1. She didn't think much and rushed back to the studio. Jin, look. An Nguyen was playing the game. When she saw He Longjin's figure, she quickly closed the game and took out the information and handed it over. He Longjin took the information, took off her black coat, and put it aside. After reading the information carefully, she frowned and rubbed her temples, which were faintly aching. She said, "You found that Hiroshio's blood type doesn't match her biological parents. Does that mean that her deceased parents might not be biological?" "Yes." An nodded and asked curiously, "No wonder she was adopted back then and couldn't wait to enter the He family. She even changed her surname." He Longjin closed the information and leaned against the sofa. She looked up at the ceiling for a long time before saying, "It seems that her parents' death was a conspiracy. From the moment she moved into the He family, they were destined to die. That makes sense. Otherwise, how could they have been killed by the people who kidnapped you? Both parties were in trouble, and their deaths were not justified. To be honest, you couldn't have been targeted, right? Or could it be that the He family was targeted?" An asked carefully. Other than He Longjin, she basically took a detour when she saw the He family members. Jin, where are you going?" An had just finished speaking when she saw He Longjin stand up and follow her. After going through a lot of trouble, she had never left Jiang City on the anniversary of Hiroshio's parents' death, much less paid her respects. There were some things that she did not know without investigating, and she was shocked when she did. These things made He Longjin's mood even heavier. It was as if there was a layer of fog shrouding her head, making her unable to see through many things. Jin, there's really something wrong with Hiroshio. Do you want me to remind your parents?" An Nguyen asked worriedly. He Longjin shook her head and smiled wryly. "There's no need. It was their idea to adopt Hiroshio back then. Besides, it's useless even if I tell them, unless they discover it themselves." After the two finished their lunch and returned to the studio, they found An staring at them. He Longjin was somewhat puzzled. "Why are you staring at me? Have I become a handsome man?" He Longjin lowered her head and touched her body. She realized that her breasts were still there. There was no change at all. Seeing her touch herself, An burst into laughter and said, "Io, does Miss He have a boyfriend? His growth is getting better and better. Can't my breasts get bigger?" He Longjin was teased by An, so she decided to take her out of the office to have some peace and quiet. However, An saw the diamond ring on her hand. She grabbed her hand and looked at it a few times before saying, This is a diamond ring. Are you really going to King marry Lu Zifen? A cabbage is being eaten by a pig. Bah! I thought you had good taste, but now I know that you're really blind. What diamond ring? He Longine only just remembered that there was such a thing on her hand when she heard it. Chapter 88. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 87, Ah Jean, I Miss You. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. This diamond ring was forced on her by Qiao Hanya. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't take it off. After that, she forgot that this diamond ring was a symbol of the Qiao family. It could even mobilize thousands of troops. It wasn't a gift from him, He Longine said. She pushed An out and closed the door behind her. She returned to her desk, looked at the diamond ring, and tried to take it off. A few seconds later, she gave up and devoted herself to her work. She wanted to develop the new software as soon as possible. She encountered a difficult problem and pondered for a long time. She stayed up for 3 nights in a row. She set up her phone so that no one could call except for Shen Biqiong. However, she didn't know that Lu Zifan had been looking for her frequently these past few days, and she almost went crazy. 3 days later, late at night, at the Scenery Garden. It was a quiet night, but the lights were bright. The dim light enveloped the Scenery Garden, like a quiet, sleeping manor. Qiao Hanya came back from outside. He took the car keys and walked past her bedroom. He saw that it was pitch black inside. He stood outside the door for a long time, pushed open the door, and walked in. He saw that the quilt was folded neatly, and the interior was spotless. Master. Han Beicheng saw him enter He Longine's room and called him from outside. Qiao Hanya walked out and returned to the study. He sat down and discussed business with Han Beicheng. He was a little absent-minded. Master. Han Beicheng said halfway. He saw Qiao Hanya's gaze pass through him and he did not know where he was looking. He could not help but call out. He saw Qiao Hanya get up and walk out with the car keys. Han Beicheng quickly followed. Unfortunately, Qiao Hanya's figure was fast and quickly disappeared into the night. What happened to Master recently? Han Beicheng scratched his head. He felt that Qiao Hanya's thoughts were getting more and more difficult to understand. He couldn't understand it anymore. Thinking of this, he resigned himself to fate and returned to the study room. He continued to organize the information, as if he was afraid that something would go wrong. Midnight, in the lounge. He Longine had stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights. She lay on the table and fell asleep. When she woke up, she found herself lying on the sofa. She moved and found that she was covered in a man's coat. There was a familiar aura on it. She realized that her legs were numb from holding the position for too long. She moved and saw Qiao Hanya lazily leaning on the side under the moonlight outside the window. She quickly sat up and thought it was an illusion. She didn't understand why he was here. She watched him close his eyes to rest. Why does a good man have to be so handsome? He Longine said in a low voice. She became playful and reached out to touch him. Before her hand could touch him, her body was lifted into the air and fell into his arms. Qiao Hanya opened his black eyes. There was no sleepiness in his eyes as he looked straight at her. Ahem, how did you know I was here? He Longine covered up her previous, wretched, side and said confidently to him, Qiao Hanya, you're trespassing. I want to call the police. Ah Jean. Qiao Hanya's deep voice was hoarse as he called her name. Hearing him call her, Ah Jean, her body felt as if her acupuncture points had been pressed. She sat in his arms, unable to move. It was only after a long time that she finally reacted. If she remembered correctly, this was the first time he had called her name affectionately since they met. What's wrong? He Longine asked. Qiao Hanya tightened his arms and pulled her into his embrace. He lowered his head and pressed his face against hers. After a long time, he said, I think I miss you. Ah Jean. Xiao Hanye's voice was like a dream in the middle of the night, lingering in her heart. She raised her head to look at him. The two of them looked at each other. The flames of love in the air seemed to have been ignited. Xiao Hanye's fingertips climbed onto her face and inserted into her hair. He held the back of her head and said in a low voice, "I miss you." Some people inexplicably moved into their hearts. No matter how much they resisted, they could not be driven away. Because of that one glance, Xiao Hanye knew that it was the life he wanted. Chapter 89. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 88. I've offended you just now. Let me use the rest of my life to make it up to you. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. Me. He Longjin was deeply moved by his affectionate call. Her mouth was a little dry, and when she felt him approaching, she moved. Her legs were a little numb, and she lost her balance and crashed into his arms. Her small mouth kissed his thin lips. Xiao Hanye was kissed by her, and his body was screaming non-stop. He rushed out like a lion. His thin lips moved and kissed her small mouth. He Longjin was extremely nervous, and her small hands subconsciously grabbed his shoulders. Oh! He Longjin moaned softly, and her cherry lips felt numb. Her body felt like it was sucked dry, and she was powerless to cling to his embrace. Her lips were like dry sand walking in the desert, longing for the nourishment of the sweet spring. Xiao Hanye's clumsy kiss lifted them up, and the man's spirit tongue wantonly plundered. The kiss was young but domineering, and it wantonly entered. He Longjin was dizzy from his kiss, and subconsciously responded to him. Oh! Yes! She groaned softly, and her body fell onto the sofa with his support. The man's strong body pressed down on her, and his fingertips moved around her shoulders, and the sweater slid down her shoulder. He Longjin raised her head. Xiao Hanye's domineering and passionate kiss slowly slid down her neck. As he tasted her sweetness, he could faintly hear her delicate breathing. The wind blew in from outside the window, and the chill was like a plate of cold water pouring on his body, extinguishing all the passion in his body. Damn it! Xiao Hanye stood up and watched her sweater slide down, revealing her sexy shoulders. The marks of his kiss could be faintly seen on her neck. She lay on the sofa charmingly, her jet-black hair scattered around her, looking exceptionally alluring. Xiao Hanye reached out and pulled her sweater up, covering her most beautiful spring. His withdrawal also made her sober up a little. He Longjin's mind went blank. She didn't expect that she and Xiao Hanye would actually kiss just now, and almost. She, who had always been rational, never allowed herself to lose her sense of propriety, but in front of him, she always did it again and again. She turned over and got up, wanting to leave, but Xiao Hanye hugged her from behind and hugged her tightly. Ah Jean! Xiao Hanye hugged her from behind, lowered his head and rested his chin on her shoulder. He rubbed her gently and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry for offending you just now. Let me use the rest of my life to make up for it. I want to protect you." Hearing him whisper in her ear, he reached out with his wide and thick palm and held her little hand tightly. "Om, so you did it on purpose just now." He Longjin was being hugged by him. She struggled twice, but when she found that she could not break free, she gave up. Xiao Hanye hugged her tightly, as if he was afraid that she would run away. He said in a low voice, "You haven't been home for 3 days. You're afraid that you'll be abducted by a man, so you can't help yourself." Ha! He Longjin laughed heartily. She broke away from his restraint and took half a step back to maintain a distance from him. She looked him up and down and said, "You can't help yourself. Then let me see you can't help yourself." Ah! Just as she finished speaking, the man stepped forward and grabbed her slender waist. He lifted her up and spun her around on the spot. He said in a low voice, "Don't tempt me like that. I won't be able to stand it." He Longjin was overwhelmed by his favor. She cried out in fear when she saw him suddenly let go of her. Ah! She cried out in a low voice. When she landed, she was hugged by him and placed on the ground steadily. She was reluctant to let go and said, "If you don't answer, I'll take it as your acquiescence." He Longin listened and kicked him hard. He took half a step back in pain. She turned around and ran out with his car keys. "Mrs. Chiao, wait for me." Seeing this, Xiao Hanya picked up his coat and followed behind her. He shouted, "Mrs. Chiao, Mrs. Chiao." Chapter 90. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 89. Was so handsome that one could not close their legs. Author. Purple Peony Machine Translation. Shut up. He Longin was shouted by him. She quickly turned around and covered his mouth, afraid that the employees on the night shift would hear her. Xiao Hanya looked at her anxious look, and a shrewd calculation appeared in his black eyes. He knew that she was worried, so he deliberately shouted. She would naturally return to his side to cover his mouth. He Longin only reacted when she covered his mouth. She had fallen into his trap again. Seeing a certain someone silent and dark eyes looking straight at her, her mouth and tongue were dry. She reached out to cover his face and said, "Don't use your face to seduce me." "Yes, I'll listen to you from now on." Xiao Hanya immediately flattered and followed behind her. Walking out of the apartment, the cold wind blew. Although it wasn't cold, she subconsciously reached out to touch her arm. "Put on your clothes." Xiao Hanya spread out his coat and draped it over her body. He Longin was tall, but it was wrapped by his coat, making her look much smaller. She saw that his clothes were thin, so she asked, "Aren't you cold? Why are men afraid of this little bit of cold?" Xiao Hanya said. Her cold hand suddenly heated up and was tightly held by his wide and thick palm. He said, "What men are most afraid of is not meeting the person they love in their lifetime." He Longin listened and was suddenly amused. She said, Mr. Chiao, don't make it sound so nice, okay? Aren't you just afraid that you won't be able to get a wife? Nowadays, the trend of society has led to more men and fewer women. There are many people like you who are single and can't get a wife. However, it's rare that you can't get a wife because you're so handsome that people can't even close their legs. Xiao Hanya was silent. He held her hand and his fingertips touched the diamond ring that she was wearing. He Longin suddenly leaned on him and asked in a soft voice, "Don't tell me you have some other hidden illness." It was rare for Qin Nan to pick up girls every day without a woman dying of loneliness. She even suspected that Qin Nan was the reincarnation of a stallion. She had lived in Jing Garden for some time, but she had not seen Xiao Hanya looking for a woman. Looking at his room, it was unbelievably simple. One look and one could tell that he was single. "Mr. Chiao, why are you trying to please me?" He Longin asked curiously. Could it be that his goal was the same as Lu Zifen's? Xiao Hanya was asked by her. He pursed his thin lips and said in a low voice, "Someone who wants you." "Pfft, like me." He Longin was so shocked that she ran far away in a second. She kept 2 steps away from him, her small hands behind her as she scrutinized him like an old cadre. "Then how many women do you like?" "I've never found a woman." Xiao Hanya had seen countless people because of her words, so he refuted her words seriously. He Longin listened to his words. She raised her head and turned around. She looked at him casually and said, "Really? I didn't before, but now." "You are enough," Xiao Hanya said. He strode forward and followed beside her. He looked at the shadows of the 2 people, which were elongated by the light. They intertwined together as if they could not be separated. He Longin listened. She narrowed her eyes slyly and said in a low voice, "Like me." "Sure, Benov calm, well, there is a courtyard in front. There are hundreds of vicious dogs in it. The owner of this courtyard is very mysterious. It is said that there are peach trees growing in the courtyard and they can bloom in winter. If you dare to go in and pick one, then I will be considered lucky to have a peach blossom," he Longin said. The vicious dogs in there would bite people. Not to mention Xiao Hanya, even she did not dare to try it. Therefore, what she said was just to scare him. Really? Xiao Hanya listened and nodded at her. He walked forward and said, "Do you think I am bored?" She walked a few steps and found that Xiao Hanya did not follow. She only said, "Wait for me to come back."